The art of emotional mastery. Real power isn't about feeling nothing. It's about feeling everything while remaining unmoved by the chaos of it all. Consider how fragile your peace truly is. One careless text message, a single cutting remark, a misinterpreted tone, and your entire day collapses. You were centered, grounded, whole. Then one moment arrives, and suddenly your entire emotional landscape shifts. That isn't merely stress, that's your feelings orchestrating your existence. And if you don't interrupt this pattern, it compounds relentlessly. You'll say things your soul never meant. You'll take actions that corrode your character. You'll wound others or yourself, not from malice, but from a fundamental inability to pause. This isn't about suppressing your humanity. This is about reclaiming your agency. It's about building the capacity to stand at the eye of a storm and consciously choose your next move. When you master the discipline of non-reaction, everything shifts. You remain composed, your vision clarifies. You preserve what matters most, your inner peace. This is what real transformation looks like. This is how to stop surrendering your life to your emotions and start commanding it with strength. Chapter 1. The power between the impulse and the action. Life will deliver moments that shake you to your core. Someone's words will land like daggers. A tone will feel like disrespect. An unexpected message will awaken something you thought was settled. In these exact seconds, something primal rises within you, an urgency to react. You feel it physically, a tightness spreading through your chest, heat rising in your throat, adrenaline surging through your hands. And in that instant, your emotions demand a reaction. But here lies the transformation point. Just because an impulse ignites doesn't mean you're obligated to obey it. You can feel the fire rise and choose not to be consumed by it. That's where genuine power begins. That's when you seize control over your feelings instead of surrendering to them. The world has trained us all wrong. We're conditioned to react instantly, defend fiercely, prove ourselves relentlessly, strike back when wounded. This programming keeps millions trapped in endless cycles of conflict. They live enslaved to their impulses, mistaking emotions for truth. But emotions are not facts. They're signals, meant to be read and understood, never blindly obeyed. There exists a space, infinitesimally small, but absolutely critical, between what you feel and what you do. Most people sprint through this space without noticing it exists. Exceptional people learn to dwell there. In that fraction of a second when something upsets you, you feel the heat, the tension, your thoughts spiraling, and then comes your choice. You can surrender to the impulse, or you can observe it, sit with it, and consciously refuse to submit. That is self-mastery. That is freedom. It's not about disconnecting from your emotions. It's about refusing to be puppeteered by them. The questions you train yourself to ask during these critical moments reshape everything. Not how should I respond, but do I even need to respond? Not what should I say back, but does this deserve my energy? When someone speaks cruelly, you're not obligated to answer. When someone attacks your reputation unfairly, you don't have to mount a defense. When someone provokes you deliberately, you're not required to let them win. Most powerfully, when your emotions demand attention, you don't have to grant them permission. Anger doesn't make you weak. Hurt doesn't make you broken. These are authentic human experiences, but you become stronger when you refuse to let them commandeer your behavior. Reacting emotionally transfers your power outward. Choosing restraint reclaims it completely. Here's the liberating truth. You can build this skill. It develops like muscle through consistent practice and awareness. Start small. When someone cuts you off on the road, when an online message stings, when someone speaks down to you, feel the emotion fully, but don't obey it. Sit with it. Don't run from it. Don't suppress it. Don't fight it. Simply witness it. Notice it completely. Then consciously choose your next action with intention. That's how authentic control begins, not through dramatic gestures, but through countless small moments of self-awareness.
Your emotions will always demand a reaction. You'll feel that pull viscerally. But remember this, you are not your feelings. You are not your reactions. You are the consciousness observing everything unfold, and that consciousness holds the power to make a different choice. Countless people sacrifice their peace on the altar of things they could have simply ignored. They wage wars with people they could have simply walked away from. They exhaust themselves explaining themselves to those who'd already decided their narrative. They react from fear, ego, anger, insecurity, and all it creates is an endless loop. Emotion sparks action, action births regret, and the cycle perpetuates. But rupture that cycle. Start refusing to react to every provocation. Step into an entirely different existence, one where you remain calm beneath pressure, one where you walk away with your dignity intact, one where peace becomes more sacred than being right. There is no strength in volume. There is no power in quick anger. There is immense strength in knowing exactly how you feel while choosing not to lose yourself within it. This strength demands practice. It demands patience. It transforms everything. Your relationships deepen because you stop overreacting to minor offenses. Your confidence strengthens because no one else controls your emotional responses anymore. Your thinking clarifies. Your choices align with your values. You speak less, but what you say means more. You handle difficult people with grace you didn't know you possessed. You remain still when everything around you is turbulent. And people recognize this. They respect those who don't react to everything because it demonstrates maturity, growth, leadership. You don't need to achieve perfection here. You simply need to practice daily. Today, perhaps you hold your tongue through an argument. Tomorrow, maybe you pause for just 5 seconds before responding. The next day, you walk away from drama entirely. These small victories matter profoundly. Every instance you choose non-reaction strengthens you. Reactivity is simple, rage is simple, but composure under pressure, that's real discipline. And discipline constructs the life that most people only dream about. A life no longer commandeered by external circumstances because you've mastered what transpires within. Don't be the person who reacts to everything. Be the architect of your own response, the designer of your own story, the protector of your own peace. That's emotional maturity. That's real self-respect. It's not about winning arguments. It's about exiting with your serenity intact. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. You don't need to respond to any perceived offense. You don't need to shoulder the weight of every emotional reaction. You're allowed to feel abundantly, but you're equally allowed to rise above it. That urge to react will persist, but so will your capacity to pause, reflect, breathe, and let things pass. Within that pause, within that deliberate choice, lives your true power. If you want to fundamentally transform your existence, start here. Face the impulse to react. Look it directly in the eye and declare, "Not today." That's genuine strength. That's real evolution. That's victory.
The truth cuts deep. If you want to develop genuine emotional fortitude, you must cease running from unease and start learning from it. Discomfort isn't your adversary. It's not something to obliterate. It's something to welcome, understand, and listen to. It's your nervous system signaling that something internal requires attention, not avoidance, not escape, but presence. And if you perpetually flee from that signal, you'll never address the fundamental issue. You'll simply patch the surface. But that discomfort returns, persistently, until you finally stop and feel it completely. When you sit with discomfort, you're not capitulating to it, you're witnessing it. You're granting yourself permission to feel without the desperate need to fix it instantly. You're strengthening your capacity to remain grounded within it. And that's precisely where transformation begins, in those unbearable moments most people abandon. That's exactly where you must lean in. Discomfort educates far more profoundly than comfort ever could. It exposes what you avoid. It pinpoints where your patience dissolves. It illuminates your deepest patterns. And if you're courageous enough to remain present with it, even briefly, it will speak your authentic truth. You won't like everything you discover. You'll witness how instantaneously your mind gravitates toward distraction. You'll observe how frantically you attempt to engineer solutions. You'll notice how desperately you try to flee what feels difficult. But that awareness transforms everything. Once you recognize these patterns, you can reshape them. You can train your mind to hold steady. You can teach your body to breathe through intensity. You can reprogram yourself to respond differently than before. Feeling discomfort doesn't diminish you. You're human. Every soul on this planet experiences it. The distinction emerges in how you navigate it. Some people dodge it and stagnate. Others confront it and flourish. You're deciding which person you'll become. When something challenging surfaces, a demanding conversation, a moment of silence, an intrusive thought you despise, pause. Don't reach for anything. Don't scramble to reshape the feeling. Just sit. Notice your breathing. Detect where the tension lives inside you, your stomach, your shoulders, your jaw. Simply observe. Don't attempt alteration. Don't judge it. Simply feel it fully. This space is where you construct authentic emotional resilience, because if you can remain within discomfort without running, without reacting, without shutting down, you're reclaiming your sovereignty. You're learning to respond intentionally rather than escaping through habit. Most of your suffering doesn't originate from what you experience. It stems from what you do to escape what you experience. You articulate words you don't mean. You make decisions you later regret. You operate from panic, tension, or fear, not because you're corrupted, but because you never developed the capacity to sit motionless within challenging moments. Train yourself to sit with tension, and something remarkable happens. It doesn't persist as long as you anticipate it. Your resistance to it amplifies the sensation, but when you grant it permission to exist, it frequently softens. Your thinking clarifies, your thoughts decelerate, your heartbeat stabilizes. And within that stillness, you perceive with accuracy. You're not obligated to solve everything in the moment you feel it. Often, your only responsibility is to feel it and allow it to pass through. You're not defective for experiencing overwhelm. You're not living incorrectly for experiencing pressure. The objective isn't escaping tension permanently. It's refusing to be dominated by it. A profound tranquility emerges when you relinquish your need to react to every uncomfortable sensation, when you stop requiring instant resolution, when you refuse to hide from it, when you simply sit, breathe, and observe. That tranquility can't be easily shattered. You begin understanding that you're vaster than your emotions, that you're not your stress, that you're not your dread. That tension is simply energy, energy you can contain, energy you can navigate, energy that doesn't have to sabotage your day or damage your connections. This ability transforms everything. It revolutionizes your problem solving. It reshapes how you navigate conversations. It fundamentally alters your experience of pain, irritation, perplexity, and sorrow. Rather than escaping, you advance. Rather than reacting, you listen. Rather than running, you expand. You become that extraordinary person who doesn't crumble under pressure. The person who doesn't explode when uncomfortable. The person who can sit within discomfort without permitting it to define them.
That's an exceptionally potent way to exist. Most people orbit in repetitive cycles. They experience tension, they flee from it, they encounter momentary reprieve, then the tension re-emerges with greater intensity. Each return makes them feel increasingly trapped. But the cycle fractures the moment you sit with the discomfort instead of escaping it. That's where healing originates. That's where strength develops. Practice this intentionally. It won't feel natural initially. It might feel frightening. It might feel awkward. But begin modestly. When difficulty strikes, don't flee. Just sit, breathe, and observe what unfolds internally. You'll discover surprises. You'll recognize that your thoughts aren't always factual, that your body can withstand more than you believed, that emotions dissipate when you offer them space. You'll stop overthinking because you're no longer avoiding, you're confronting. And confrontation is what cultivates genuine confidence. You'll cease demanding that everything feel perfectly. You'll stop requiring instant relief. You'll stop dreading intense emotion because you've trained yourself to move through it, comprehend it, and let it shift without spiraling into panic. And the more you rehearse this, the more grounded you'll become. You'll transform into that composed person in the room, the one thinking clearly, the one speaking intentionally, the one listening before reacting. That kind of presence is rare, potent, and deeply respected. You won't need to broadcast your calm. People will feel it emanating from you. You won't need to articulate your strength. People will witness it directly. You'll stop being enslaved to tension and start becoming a guide for yourself and those around you. And when adversity strikes, because it inevitably will, you'll encounter those moments with a lucid mind and a steady heart. You'll abandon the sensation that life is something to escape. You'll begin trusting yourself to handle what emerges. Because you've internalized this profound truth, tension isn't your enemy, it's your instructor. It arrives not to damage, but to reveal. It comes not to harm, but to illuminate. And once you master sitting with it, you'll realize that what you once feared was never more formidable than the version of yourself that consciously chooses to meet it. Chapter 4. Treasure your silence more than instant validation. There will be chapters in your life when your silence becomes the singular shield protecting your tranquility. Moments when someone's words strike a nerve. Times when others distort your actions. Instances when you feel pressured to respond simply so others see your perspective. Yet one of the most transformative abilities you can cultivate is valuing your silence above the urgent hunger to be understood immediately.
The world doesn't require additional noise. It needs individuals who understand when to remain still, when to communicate meaningfully, when to pause wisely, and who navigate from a place of authority rather than reactivity. You become that person by honoring silence, not as retreat, but as strategy. Not because you're withdrawing from existence, but because you're directing your life with intention. Not every truth requires amplification. Not every misconception demands your response. Sometimes your greatest strength manifests in the words you consciously choose not to utter. And when you can treasure that silence more than the desperate need for instant validation, you transform into the kind of individual who commands every space they inhabit. There exists a moment so minute that most people miss it entirely, when something within you awakens and compels you to say something purely to preserve your image, not because it's useful, not because it creates healing, but because your pride demands an audience. That moment typically emerges when you experience judgment, disrespect, when someone's words challenge your value or interrogate your choices. And in that precise second, pride advances and wants to speak in your defense. But understand this clearly. Pride doesn't exist to solve anything. It exists to defend. It articulates only to make you feel vindicated momentarily, never to make circumstances better long-term. It speaks to cling to authority, even when it obliterates your peace. And if you don't learn to detect that moment, you'll perpetuate the identical trap, reacting in methods that feel satisfying for seconds and generate regret for weeks. Pride has volume. It yearns to interrupt. It hungers to demonstrate. It ensures you don't appear diminished, insignificant, or erroneous. But when pride commandeers the conversation, it disregards the connection. It dismisses understanding. It abandons truth. It cares exclusively about image. That's precisely why so many arguments spiral without resolution, because pride is conducting the dialogue, and pride ensures nobody's actually hearing anyone. You must become skilled at recognizing when pride prepares to seize control. It doesn't scream. It begins quietly, a fleeting thought, a surge of emotion, a tightness manifesting in your chest, a sudden sensation that you must articulate something immediately or you'll appear diminished. That's your moment. That's where you must decelerate. That's where your real power concentrates, not in speaking, but in identifying that impulse climbing and choosing differently. Why do I feel compelled to articulate this? Ask yourself. Is it because it's authentic and beneficial, or is it simply my pride demanding victory? If pride is operating, you possess a choice. You can permit it to speak and amplify the discord, or you can withdraw, anchor yourself in silence, and let the moment evaporate without compromising your peace. It demands emotional fortitude to sit with your pride without surrendering to it. It demands awareness to recognize that merely because you feel the urge to respond doesn't mean responding is necessary. And perhaps most crucially, it demands maturity to prioritize your long-term tranquility over your momentary ego. Pride perpetually wants the final word. It insists on being correct. But being correct doesn't perpetually improve circumstances. It doesn't necessarily strengthen you. Frequently, it leaves you more frustrated, more depleted, more disconnected, because while you were winning that moment, you were losing the larger picture. You'll encounter moments when people speak thoughtlessly, when they undermine your effort, when they diminish your potential, when they misrepresent your narrative, and pride will be the initial voice that rises, but that doesn't indicate it's the one you must obey. Observe how pride transforms trivial matters into massive conflicts, how it manufactures words you didn't strategize, how it entraps you in repetitive cycles of argument and remorse. And the more conscious you grow of it, the more authority you reclaim it from it. There's profound strength in restraint. There's genuine power in pausing. There's intelligence in allowing your pride to whisper internally, but never externally. You can hear it without surrendering the microphone. You can validate it without letting it command. Because authentic confidence doesn't need amplification. It doesn't require vindication. It intuitively understands when to articulate and when to remain still. It recognizes that not every comment requires correction, and not every belief deserves challenge. And that's where your peace begins expanding, in the space between feeling triggered and refusing to react to it, in the distance between being misunderstood and not needing to correct it, in the discipline it takes to silence your pride when it wants to scream. Contemplate all those interactions that deteriorated because of a single unnecessary comment, one reaction that came too hastily, one response propelled by pride rather than accuracy. Those instances compound, extracting far more from you than they deposit. But now you recognize what to monitor for. Now you understand how to intercept it. You're not imprisoned by your pride. You don't need to verbalize every thought. You don't have a responsibility to justify every aspect of your life. You can stand immobile in silence and still stand resilient. It doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment. It reflects choosing your confrontations intelligently. You speak with intention, not obligation. You express what genuinely matters, not what merely protects your ego.
That's how you remain command of your consciousness, your emotions, and your trajectory. You'll sense temptation to react quickly. You'll experience a surge through your body. Your heartbeat might accelerate. Your thoughts might scatter. But that's your signal. That's your warning. Pride is advancing, and you now possess the consciousness to step backward. Let others discourse. Let others misconstrue. Let others think as they will. That's their expedition. Yours is to mature, to lead yourself, to build a life that doesn't hinge on other people's beliefs. And that kind of life requires commanding your interior world. The moment you identify pride ascending, inhale deeply. Reorient yourself towards who you authentically are. Remind yourself that strength doesn't amplify, that authentic authority isn't about being correct. It's about maintaining serenity. It's about making decisions that harmonize with who you aspire to become, not just how you feel instantaneously. This is a perpetual discipline. It won't always be easiest. There will be instances when you surrender, instances when your pride triumphs. That's okay. What matters is that you're witnessing now. You're developing awareness, and awareness marks the threshold of transformation. Every instance you intercept pride before it speaks, you flourish. Every instance you choose tranquility over self-vindication, you prevail. Every instance you determine to hold your quiet instead of inflaming tension, you evolve into an ever more refined version of yourself. Pride might perpetually be present, but now you're not obliged to obey it. You've accessed something stronger, your consciousness, your restraint, your perspicacity. Use it, trust it, and let it guide you towards a more composed, more authoritative existence.
There's a pivotal instant that decides everything, a diminutive space between what you experience and what you execute next. Most people traverse from feeling to reaction instantaneously, from frustration to yelling, from dread to withdrawal, from wrath to action. But if you're committed to governing your existence, if you're serious about discontinuing being dominated by everything surrounding you, you must master building space between what you experience and what you do. Emotions manifest rapidly. They materialize instantaneously. They emerge without invitation, and they're potent. Yet they don't endure indefinitely. They evolve, they fluctuate, and if you don't decelerate before responding to them, you'll manufacture consequences from ephemeral feelings, and those consequences can haunt you far longer than the feeling itself. Creating space signifies not reacting instantaneously. It signifies crafting a deliberate pause, even merely seconds, adequate time to breathe, adequate time to contemplate, adequate time to deliberately select how you'll respond rather than being sucked into the moment's intensity. That space is where your authority exists. That space is where your evolution initiates. You're not obligated to act merely because you're experiencing something. That's what children do. They cry when uncomfortable, they shriek when frustrated, they strike when denied. But you've transcended childhood. You possess the mental capacity to contemplate, to examine, to select the person you are determined to be, regardless of provocation. The authentic sources of people's complications don't stem from what they experience. They originate from the reactions that follow. It's the enraged text, the combative phrasing, the impulsive choice made under duress, the articulations that can't be reclaimed. That's precisely why that space between experience and action proves so vital. That space can preserve connections. That space can maintain your peace. That space can safeguard your tomorrow from being reshaped by momentary emotional confusion. You won't perpetually navigate this correctly. Occasionally, your reactivity will defeat you. You'll articulate something before deliberating. You'll retaliate from anguish. That's fundamentally human. But perfection isn't the objective. Consciousness is. And consciousness produces the capacity to decelerate, to recognize what's transpiring internally, and to interrogate yourself regarding whether what you're about to execute genuinely aligns with your principles, not simply your immediate reaction.
Feelings carry significance, but they're information, not commandments. They illuminate importance. They expose what's been activated in you, but you're not obligated to execute every impulse. You're not required to respond immediately to everything. You can experience something intensely and still postpone your response. That's authentic authority. That's genuine emotional intelligence. When you feel provoked, don't accelerate. Retreat internally. Perceive what's transpiring inside your physiology. Is your sternum constricting? Is your consciousness racing? That's your alert. That's your moment to manufacture space, to pause, to breathe, to interrogate what's truly occurring beneath the surface. Possibly it's not simply rage. Possibly it's betrayal. Possibly it's not simply tension. Possibly it's depletion. Possibly it's not even connected to what just transpired. Possibly it's connected to something from years ago that still hasn't mended. Without space, you'll perpetually ignore that truth. Without space, you'll repeatedly respond to symptoms and never address the source. Space grants you the possibility to select your following action with lucidity, not from raw emotion, but with perception. And clarity perpetually generates superior conclusions. Even when emotion burns intensely, even when you sense you must articulate something instantaneously, space reminds you that nearly everything feels less critical in hindsight than it does in the moment. When you manufacture space between your feelings and your reactions, you're not suppressing your experience. You're granting yourself opportunity to comprehend it. You're permitting yourself to operate from stability rather than chaos. And each instance you accomplish that, you construct a fresh pattern, a fresh habit, a fresh tier of emotional evolution. Envision how transformed your daily rhythm would be if you manufactured that space during conflict. Envision how numerous disagreements would conclude before germinating. Envision how much regret you'd circumvent. Envision all the apologies you'd avoid issuing. That's what this discipline generates, an increasingly harmonious, deliberate life. You must educate yourself to decelerate mycologically. That doesn't correlate to suppressing your feelings. It signifies confronting them with forbearance. You breathe through them. You pose questions rather than hastening towards conclusions. You present yourself the blessing of not reacting instinctively. Obstacles will confront you. Life will strike you and your feelings will reply. That's anticipated. But your behaviors stay your jurisdiction. That's where your autonomy exists. You're not obligated to enact every instant something tests your endurance. You can master the discipline of pausing, of sitting, of breathing, and subsequently choosing. This discipline benefits more than preserving your tranquility. It facilitates self-comprehension. You commence recognizing your emotional activators with greater acuity. You identify the sequences. You understand which situations affect you most significantly. And from that recognition, you cultivate. You don't just regulate feelings, you command them. You don't just avoid confrontation, you navigate it with discernment. And the more consistently you execute this, the more formidable you grow. You'll detect that you don't get ensnared in every petty disagreement. You'll feel stability even when circumstances feel chaotic. You'll become that individual others depend on during turbulent circumstances because they understand you won't respond with melodrama. You'll become known for your steadiness, and steadiness is a rare and precious capacity. This is what authentic leadership looks like, not authority over others, but command of yourself, directing your feelings, regulating your reactions, stewarding your determinations, and everything commences in that diminutive space between feeling and reaction. You don't need to explain yourself to every conviction. You don't need to address every misconception. You don't need to articulate every instance you feel hurt. Occasionally, the most commanding act you can execute is pausing, witnessing, and maintaining your potency. Conceptualize that space as your shield. It protects your peace. It filters your reactions. It prevents your feelings from hijacking your life. And the more consistently you practice it, the more it becomes your basic approach. You commence reacting from intelligence rather than hurt, from perspicacity rather than bewilderment, from authority rather than dread. And here's something to memorialize. The cosmos doesn't decelerate for you. It advances perpetually. Individuals perpetually speak. Life perpetually throws circumstances at you. So it's incumbent upon you to decelerate internally, to manufacture that space amid all the noise, to find your anchor and reside there.
When you're feeling swamped, pause.
When you're experiencing disrespected, reflect. When you're feeling misconstrued, inhale. Permit the feeling to elevate. Permit it to be completely felt. But don't permit it to thrust you into a reaction you'll later regret. Permit it to traverse you. Permit it to inform you. Permit it to reorient you toward the reality that you're in command of what transpires subsequently. That's where your metamorphosis initiates. In that serene space where nothing has yet unfolded, but everything's capacity to change. Where you get to determine whether you'll perpetuate the identical reaction or construct something superior. Where you select your days instead of permitting the yesterday to determine it for you. You're not here to exist flawlessly. You're here to exist consciously, to manufacture space, to pilot yourself forward. And the more space you manufacture, the more you'll have confidence in yourself. You'll recognize that regardless of what transpires, you won't be readily shaken because you've constructed room to contemplate, to select, to steer. And in that space, you'll uncover liberation. The autonomy to execute aligned with your convictions, not your feelings. The autonomy to withdraw when needed. The autonomy to maintain composure when others are surrendering their minds. That liberation originates from discipline, from daily intention, from selecting space repeatedly. And that determination, made tranquilly, consistently, patiently, will reconstruct your existence. Chapter 7. Liberate yourself from controlling how other individuals treat you. It appears rational initially. All of us hunger for admiration, impartiality, compassion. We yearn to be respected and encountered kindly. But here exists a reality most resist acknowledging. You cannot coerce anyone into behaving appropriately, communicating respectfully, or experiencing how you desire them to. Individuals will interact with you corresponding to their consciousness, not your dedication. And the more vigorously you pursue governance over someone else's conduct, the more extensively you compromise your own serenity. You can articulate with transparency. You can establish robust boundaries. You can materialize with genuineness. But none of that guarantees matching energy. None of that assures kindness. Some individuals will perpetually misconstrue you. Some will disrespect you. Some will disregard your significance even when you've navigated flawlessly. That's not your shortfall. That's their constraint. You must discontinue tethering your emotional equilibrium to someone else's conduct. If your tranquility depends on another's language, their treatment, their acknowledgement, their backing, subsequently you've surrendered your dominion. And once surrendered, your day can be obliterated by a solitary communication, a solitary expression, a solitary inflection. You become reactive. You become anxious. You become exhausted. Not because of who you are, but because of who you're determined to reform. Attempting to control how others treat you mirrors attempting to control meteorological phenomena. You can arrange yourself, you can answer wisely, but you cannot oblige sunshine simply because you desired it. Identical logic applies to individuals. You cannot coerce someone to appreciate what they don't comprehend. You cannot manufacture someone to honor you the manner you honor them. And the more vigorously you exert effort to control it, the more agony you inherit. Permit individuals to demonstrate authentically who they are. Grant them liberty to exhibit their tendencies. When they're erratic, acknowledge it. When they're disrespectful, identify it for its truth. Discontinue contorting yourself into someone else's anticipations merely to accumulate the recognition you think you're entitled to. You're not obliged to merit fundamental respect. And if someone manufactures you think you are, that's a notification, not an invitation. A significant component of mental growth is acknowledging that how individuals interact with you originates far more from their internal world than from yours. Individuals project their apprehensions. They behave from their insecurities. they articulate from their histories. And if you personalize all of it, you'll expend your entire existence conforming yourself for individuals who don't even comprehend themselves. Discontinue pursuing their benediction. Discontinue attempting to rehabilitate their conduct. Discontinue compromising your authenticity merely to maintain their ease. When you must ceaselessly remind someone how to interact with you, they're not your individuals. Consideration should be offered freely, not extracted through psychological exhaustion. Now, this doesn't signify becoming indifferent or endorsing exploitation. It signifies redirecting your concentration. You terminate concentrating on changing them and commence concentrating on choosing yourself. You withdraw from what depletes you. You step back from what perplexes you. You permit quiet to verbalize where articulation no longer functions. That's not surrendering, that's self-respect activated. When you discontinue pursuing governance over how individuals treat you, you liberate capacity to control how you respond. You build a more resilient interior cosmos. You commence honoring your needs over someone else's demands. And most importantly, you terminate attempting to change people unwilling to evolve themselves. You'll find peace not by resuscitating everyone, but by choosing who you invite into your existence. You possess agency over the standard. You possess agency over how closely individuals approach your essence. And the manner they interact with you supplies all the intelligence you need. You don't need to convince them. You don't need to guide them. You must acknowledge them the initial time they communicate who they are. Relinquish the necessity to dictate others' conduct. Relinquish the requirement to be appreciated by all. Relinquish the obligation to perpetually understand, perpetually forgive, perpetually modify. Your function isn't enhancing how individuals treat you. Your function is regarding yourself with such reverence that anything inferior becomes apparent and unacceptable. And something wonderful materializes when you abandon seeking governance. You commence producing it, not over others but over yourself. You commence living in a way that doesn't hinge on external validation. You discontinue speaking to individuals who don't treasure attentiveness. You terminate attempting to mend individuals who don't want help. You commence protecting your energy. You commence protecting your peace. And individuals determined to mistreat you will manufacture justifications irrespective of your caliber. You could do everything right and still face blame. You could be magnanimous and still be neglected. You could be compassionate and still be exploited. So discontinue thinking that increased dedication produces increased love. It generates exclusively increased depletion when one-directional. You don't need to reconstruct yourself for individuals to interact with you better. You need to reconstruct the individuals you allow to remain proximal. You need to discontinue tolerating what diminishes you. You need to terminate wishing that eventually they'll recognize your significance. If they don't see it immediately, it's not your function to make it visible to them. Start investing in individuals who currently interact with you compassionately. Focus on individuals who don't make you question your worth. Allocate temporal investment to those who don't make your feelings feel burdensome. Authentic connection doesn't demand perpetual reminders of kindness-oriented behavior.
You cultivate vigor when you terminate attempting to regulate how others emerge and commence being forthright regarding what that communicates. You terminate attempting to vindicate why you merit something superior and commence operating in a manner that communicates it unambiguously. You terminate maintaining deteriorated bonds purely because you once experienced comprehended. You commence selecting yourself in environments that render you imperceptible and don't misconstrue boundaries for resentment. This isn't severing individuals in fury, it's comprehending what your worth represents. It's identifying when someone's conduct no longer advances your development. It's trusting yourself to execute determinations that safeguard your essence, even when circumstances feel demanding. This is reclaiming your supremacy, Not through amplified volume, not through contention, not through repeatedly modifying others, but by advancing into environments where your attendance is inherently respected, without requiring combat. By engineering an existence where you don't pursue adoration because it's presently encompassing you in individuals who emerge uninvited. There will perpetually be someone who dismisses you, someone who judges you, someone who doesn't interact with you the manner you merit. That doesn't signify you're insufficient, it signifies they're not prepared. Don't diminish your criterion to accommodate their ease. Don't compress yourself merely to remain proximal. The appropriate individuals won't demand substantiation. You are not here to superintend others' feelings. You are not here to merit the fundamental minimum. You are here to manifest an existence mirroring your authenticity, your authority, your essence. And anybody incapable of harmonizing with that frequency, you acknowledge and advance. Discontinue furnishing individuals boundless admission to your psychological condition. Defend it, guide it, advocate for it. Because the moment you abandon pursuing governance over others' interaction with you, you commence directing yourself. And that's where authentic peace commences. Not in metamorphosizing everyone surrounding you, but in shifting what you authorize to impact your interior world. And when you execute that, you'll eventually understand that the emancipation you were pursuing from others' conduct was perpetually yours to generate. You additionally commence recognizing your sequences. You commence asking yourself, why do I perceive compelled to articulate this? Does it originate from perspicacity or originates it from insecurity? Does this articulation facilitate or does it simply manufacture me yearn to be appreciated? These interrogations maintain you truthful. They facilitate you perceive when you're articulating from authority and when you're articulating from terror. You'll experience the attraction to articulate yourself in instances of intensity, when someone interrogates your judgment, when someone misinterprets your quiet, when someone designates you without comprehending your chronicle. That attraction will experience formidable. But merely because you experience it doesn't suggest you need to pursue it. You can sit with it, you can breathe through it, you can permit it to traverse. And what you'll perceive is that the individuals who genuinely regard, the inhabitants who matter, they don't require prolonged explanations. They presently comprehend your essence. They presently recognize your character. And when they don't, they pose with gentleness, not accusation. They furnish you distance. They audition. They don't mandate instantaneous perspicacity. And those symbolize the individuals meriting your dedication. Yet the inhabitants who interrogate your purposes, dismiss your background, and push you for solutions merely to experience vindicated, you don't need to articulate yourself to them. That's not progression, that's a snare. And every instance you approach it, you compress a little, you sacrifice a little of your perspicacity. But when you withdraw, when you articulate minimally, when you defend your foundation in quiet, that's when you elevate. You understand that quiet doesn't invariably signify circumventing. Occasionally, it signifies safeguarding. Occasionally, it signifies deciding not to contest with someone's interpretation of you. Occasionally, it signifies honoring yourself sufficiently to not squander an additional minute justifying what you comprehend is genuine in your essence. You are not here to correspond to all individuals' anticipations. You're here to manifest aligned with your authenticity, to navigate with intention, to manufacture determinations supporting your tranquility. And if someone can't recognize that, no articulation will ever suffice. Discontinue articulating why you necessitate solitude. Discontinue articulating why you've transformed. Discontinue articulating why you selected your trajectory. If it carries significance, your existence will demonstrate it. If they treasure you, they'll comprehend it. And if they don't, your quiet remains the accurate determination. You cultivate confidence every instance you withstand the appetite to articulate what doesn't necessitate articulation.
You experience liberation when you relinquish the obligation to manufacture all individuals harmonize with your judgment. You commence walking in autonomy when you recognize that not every misconception necessitates your temporal investment. There emerges a profound capacity in accepting individuals won't recognize you. It communicates you're unrestricted. It communicates your personality isn't manufactured on external benediction. It communicates you're anchored on a structure that nobody can undermine with an interrogation or a hesitation. Inhabit in such a manner that you don't necessitate articulating your every transaction. Exist so grounded in your purposes that quiet experiences more commanding than articulation. Have confidence that your veracity will articulate even if your articulations don't. And when articulating becomes pointless, don't. Because the serenity you'll experience from defending your vigor will perpetually be more beneficial than the momentary ease of being comprehended by someone who never genuinely attentively listened initially. Chapter 9. Guard your energy when the universe demands it. There will materialize instances when everything encompassing you experiences turbulent, individuals requesting things, obligations crushing, communications accumulating, confrontations ascending, unanticipated obstacles materializing when you least possess the vitality to navigate them. And amid all of that, there exists something the cosmos perpetually perpetrates, extracting your vigor in every direction. All individuals desire something. Everything feels critical, and when you're not deliberate, you'll expend yourself piece by piece until practically nothing survives for yourself. You must master maintaining your vigor when the cosmos extracts it from you, not because you're narcissistic, not because you don't treasure individuals, but because you comprehend how readily you can forfeit your tranquility when you don't shield it. This concerns acquiring the discipline to persist anchored in a cosmos that's perpetually accelerating. It's concerned with refusing to permit every demand, every disturbance, and every sensation to dislodge you from your foundation. You don't owe your comprehensive emotional participation to everything transpiring surrounding you. Not every circumstance merits your comprehensive reaction. Not every communication necessitates your total emotional commitment. You determine where your energy travels, and that determination, implemented consistently, will contour the excellence of your existence. There exists a distinction between being engaged and being extracted. Being engaged signifies you're here, yet grounded. Being extracted signifies your consciousness, your feelings, and your concentration are perpetually being fractured by external forces. One communication can obliterate your complete temporal experience. One observation can redirect your complete disposition. One expression from someone else, and instantaneously you're unbalanced. Yet here's what you must internalize profoundly. Your energy is your responsibility. You can't furnish the cosmos authorization to determine how substantially of yourself you surrender. You must recognize your particular boundaries. You must identify when you're stretching excessively. And additionally, importantly, you must know when to retract. Individuals will persist requesting. Life will persist demanding. The cosmos won't terminate striking. But you must know when to respond and when to permit the instant to move forward unaddressed. You're incapable to ignite every conflagration. You're incapable to pursue serenity by gratifying all individuals, because if you make an effort to correspond to every necessity, reciprocate to every sentiment, remedy every obstacle, you'll collapse, not instantaneously, but gradually, regularly, until depletion transforms into your standard. Maintaining your vigor isn't about being detached, it's about being intelligent. It's about comprehending that when your consciousness is fatigued, your judgments grow compromised. When your essence is drained, your tolerance diminishes. When your energy is scattered, your focus evaporates. And when you navigate like that perpetually, you forget who you are.
Concentrate on what depletes you. Perceive who manufactures you experience weighty after every dialogue. Identify which circumstances manufacture your cerebrations to spiral. Subsequently interrogate yourself. Do I necessitate to contribute my comprehensive vigor to this, or do I necessitate to defend myself immediately? You're not being impolite by generating distance. You're being accountable. Because the iteration of you that emerges exhausted, reactive, or overwhelmed isn't assisting anybody. When you maintain your vigor, you grow more transparent. You manufacture superior determinations. You persist tranquil in demanding circumstances. You're proficient to contribute from a position of authority, not obligation. The cosmos frequently communicates that contributing all symbolizes adoration. Yet that's not adoration. That's burnout. That's psychological depletion costumed as compassion. Authentic affection initiates with self-respect. And self-respect communicates, I'm capable to treasure others considerably without fracturing myself throughout the progression. You additionally must terminate furnishing psychological admission to individuals unfamiliar with how to navigate it. Merely because someone extracts at your participation doesn't signify they merit your vigor. You're not an antidote to all difficulties. You're not a reply to all feelings. You're authorized to be motionless when the cosmos is thundering. You're authorized to articulate no absent guilt. You're authorized to select tranquility over critical importance. And don't confuse maintaining your vigor for disconnection. You're not withdrawing, you're withdrawing inward. You're understanding how to refill preceding contributing. You're selecting authority over reaction. You're manufacturing space internally to respire, to contemplate, to experience, and to determine, rather than being steered by everything materializing surrounding you. It's similarly vital to acknowledge the sequences. Do you perpetually experience drained subsequent to definite communications? Do you perpetually experience tense subsequent to navigating your mobile device? Do you identify yourself snapping at individuals because your consciousness is overwhelmed? These symbolize notifications. These represent your physiology's methodology of communicating that you've acknowledged excessively, that you've unsealed the entrance to excessive vocalization, that you necessitate to retract and reconnect. Maintaining your vigor signifies maintaining the discipline to decelerate, to interrogate yourself preceding jumping in. Is this mine to sustain? Is this my obstacle to solve? Is this the most advantageous application of my temporal investment and authority immediately? And if the solution is nope, you recognize that not absent guilt, not absent apology, yet with assurance that you're executing what's optimal for your enduring wellness. This isn't concerning erecting obstacles, it's concerning erecting limitations. And those boundaries don't expel individuals, they maintain you comprehensive. They remind you that you matter additionally, that your necessities are legitimate, that your recuperation is vital, that your attendance is more commanding when it's not disseminated excessively thinly. The cosmos will perpetually be complete of disturbance, yet you don't necessitate to correspond to its magnitude. You don't necessitate to be available every instant. You don't necessitate to transport issues that were never supposed for you. Relinquish the culpability. Relinquish the obligation. Select to defend your tranquility even when others don't comprehend it, because eventually not anybody else will experience the burden you transport. Not anybody else will experience the psychological expense of perpetually contributing. Exclusively you'll awaken fatigued in your entity. Exclusively you'll experience dispersed in your consciousness. So accomplish the accountable component. Step backward when you necessitate to. Persist quiet when it facilitates, and maintain your vigor like it's your most beneficial resource, because it absolutely is. You'll commence identifying the distinction. You'll identify how substantially clearer your cerebrations transform, how substantially more secure your feelings experience, how substantially more engaged you are with individuals who genuinely matter. And most substantially, you'll commence acknowledging yourself repeatedly, not the iteration that's perpetually operating around, trying to navigate, yet the iteration that's tranquil, transparent, commanding, and anchored. That iteration exists,
yet it can exclusively come forward when you terminate providing your vigor to all and commence selecting what genuinely merits it. The cosmos will persist revolving. Obstacles will persist surfacing. Individuals will persist containing anticipations, yet you'll no extended be extracted in 100 orientations by all of it, because you've manufactured a determination to maintain your vigor, not from fear, yet from intelligence, not from departure, yet from authority, not because you don't treasure, yet because you ultimately treasure yourself sufficiently to prevent emptying from a void container. Chapter 10. Choose self-leadership before your emotions lead you astray. Every temporal occasion you awaken, a singular interrogation is presently lingering for you. Who's going to commandeer your existence currently? You, alternative, your emotions. That selection might experience diminutive, yet it's the divergence amongst manufacturing an existence anchored in orientation and restraint, alternative, one that's perpetually reciprocating to whatever feeling emerges. Feelings compose part of mankind's experience. You'll experience resentment, grief, exhilaration, terror, misgiving, aggravation, aspiration, occasionally all in a sole temporal occasion. Yet those feelings weren't engineered to navigate you. They're intended to be recognized, grasped, and stewarded. You were perpetually intended to navigate yourself throughout them. Determining to navigate yourself communicates you assume complete accountability for your reactions. You terminate blaming your disposition, your situations, alternative other individuals for how you materialize. You comprehend that feelings are authentic, yet they're not lasting. They transit, they transmute, and they perpetually misrepresent. When you permit your feelings to manufacture your judgments, you'll persist modifying orientation every instant something gets demanding, alternative doesn't feel favorable instantaneously. You'll discontinue pursuits you genuinely desire. You'll erode associations you treasure. You'll articulate things that don't correlate with who you are, not because you're an unethical individual, but because you didn't pause enough to navigate yourself initially. The cosmos is packed with individuals who never mastered navigating themselves. They permit aggravation to navigate their articulation. They permit terror to select their selections. They insecurity to contour their operations. Subsequently, they examine around, interrogating why their existence feels uncontrolled. Yet the veracity exists. It's not the cosmos, it's what they're allowing internally. They've surrendered the navigating mechanism to whatever feeling transpires to be most commanding that temporal occasion. And the lengthier you manifest like that, the surplus misaligned your existence transforms.
Navigating yourself means you don't persist until all experience is faultless to perform. You execute what necessitates accomplishment even when you don't experience motivated to. You persist tranquil even when your consciousness desires to anxious. You sustain your criterion high even when your feelings attempt to drag them minimal. That's not emotionless. That's not mechanical. That's evolution. That's authority. That's command. And it initiates from the interior outward. You're incapable to govern what you experience. That component is inherent, yet you perpetually govern what you manufacture with what you experience. And when you terminate furnishing your feelings the concluding articulation, you commence relying yourself increasingly. You traverse demanding circumstances with expanded perspicacity. You terminate circumventing discomfort and commence navigating it with intent. You terminate being commanded by emotional states and commence being commanded by principles. Most individuals anticipate inspiration. They anticipate experiencing favorable, preceding executing action. Yet authentic advancement doesn't materialize in these instances. It materializes when you locomote forward despite how you experience. When you awaken exhausted yet persist materialize. When you experience affronted yet persist selecting to reciprocate tranquilly. When you experience overwhelmed yet persist taking one stride forward. That's what it communicates to navigate yourself. Your feelings will consistently provide you shortcuts. Reciprocate immediately. Articulate what you desire absent thinking. Discontinue because it's demanding. Inculpate others. Circumvent the demanding component.
Yet command articulates, decelerate, respire, contemplate, determine, interrogate yourself what manner of individual you desire to transform into and function like that, not determined by your instantaneous feeling, yet determined by your enduring perspective. You're incapable to construct a commanding existence by submitting to all psychological impulse. You construct it by staying consistent when all interior wants to withdraw. You construct it by executing the accurate component when the effortless component experiences improved. And every instant you determine to navigate yourself in these seconds, you transform a little increasingly self-assured, a little increasingly secure, a little increasingly harmonized with who you genuinely are. Feelings are momentary, yet their outcomes can be perpetual. One selection manufactured in resentment, one communication expressed in aggravation, one option misplaced from terror, all of these instances accumulate. Yet when you navigate yourself, you commence decelerating items. You commence inquiring superior interrogations. What carries significance primarily? What's the consequence I genuinely desire? Does this feeling facilitating, alternatively harming? And determined by those clarifications, you manufacture a determination that represents your authority, not your tension. Individuals will pronounce items that activate you. Life will contest you. Your preparations won't perpetually progress without friction. Yet when your interior cosmos is navigated by restraint rather than feeling, you persist transparent. You terminate being disoriented by all surrounding you. You terminate descending for the identical psychological entrapments, and you commence manufacturing something that perpetually persists. It doesn't communicate you terminate experiencing. It communicates you experience profoundly and persist navigating intelligently. It communicates you furnish yourself distance to navigate absent permitting your feelings thrust you into reactions you'll later regret. It communicates you treasure your feelings, yet you don't authorize them to navigate your existence. When you commence navigating yourself, you terminate being readily impacted by the psychological states of others. You terminate being dragged into all emotional tempest. You acknowledge that somebody else's detrimental temporal occasion doesn't necessitate transforming into yours, that somebody's resentment doesn't mandate your reciprocation, that somebody's conviction doesn't necessitate destabilizing your assurance. You commence inhabiting from the interior outward, and that displacement furnishes you authority. Because the veracity exists, the strongest individuals aren't the inhabitants who experience the smallest. They're the inhabitants who experience all, yet persist manufacturing intelligent selections. They're the inhabitants who recognize when to retract, when to articulate, when to relinquish, and when to defend the boundary. They don't permit the feeling of the instant demolish the structure they've invested epochs manufacturing. Leadership isn't managing all surrounding you, it's managing yourself, even when all surrounding you feels uncontrolled. It's manufacturing selections harmonizing with your principles, not your feelings. It's manufacturing an existence that you're incapable to withdraw from. When situations get demanding, every instant you determine to navigate yourself initially, you strengthen. You commence to cultivate assurance with yourself. You commence to have confidence that regardless of what surfaces, you're proficient to navigate it absent fracturing yourself. And that conviction manufactures assurance, not a vocal, flashy assurance, yet a serene, comprehensive variety that's incapable to be readily disoriented. You'll commence identifying the distance in your associations. You'll interact more transparently. You'll navigate tension with tranquility. You won't necessitate to triumph at all confrontation. You won't necessitate to substantiate your importance, because when you navigate yourself, your attendance articulates for you. Your operations transport amplified heaviness. Your selections encourage reliance, not because they're faultless, yet because they're manufactured with perspicacity, not tempestuousness. There's something commanding pertaining to being proficient to articulate, I experience aggravated, yet I'm not going to execute on it instantaneously. Alternatively, I experience apprehensive, yet I'm going to persist navigating. Alternatively, I experience misconstrued, yet I'm going to persist grounded. That's what authentic command appears like, and it doesn't initiate with supervising others, it initiates with supervising your consciousness. Make it a perpetual discipline. Each first light remind yourself, feelings will materialize, yet I determine. Misgivings will emerge, yet I select my subsequent stride. Obligation will accumulate, yet I navigate my following measure. And the surplus you exercise this, the surplus inherent it transforms. You terminate necessitating to manage all surrounding you because you've manufactured authority internally. This represents how you commandeer authority of your existence, not by commanding your feelings, yet by declining to authorize them to commandeer you, not by circumventing demanding feelings, yet by navigating via them with restraint, not by being unimpacted, but by being grounded in something more penetrating than how you experience instantaneously. That's what it communicates to navigate yourself, to examine feeling directly in the optic, treasure its attendance, and persist selecting your trajectory with authority and intelligence. Not all occasions will experience facile, yet all occasions represents a supplementary possibility to materialize. Persist consistent and manufacture an existence that's navigated from internally.